Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel, and I'm a music educator based in the U.S. I run an organization called Akojukbo. I was actually born in Ekiti, Isa Ekiti, but I left when I was 5, so I've lived most of my life in the U.S. And today, our guest is Dr. Samuel Ajose, and he completed his doctoral studies at the University of Ibadan, and he currently serves as the acting head in the Department of Music at the University of Ibadan. We're very glad to have him today. I want to apologize about the confusion with the Zoom link. Usually we're just better organized with that, but yeah, again, I want to apologize about that. But thank you so much for joining us today. The topic today is focusing on a different perspective on music education through the lens of Nigerian educators. And my first question for Dr. Ajose is could you tell us about your early days as a young teenager and youth? Oh, I think you're on mute again. Oh, I think you're still on mute.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So I didn't hear the last question, please.
Oh, so the question was, could you tell us about your early days as a young teenager and as a youth?
All right. Well, thank you for having me, and let me apologize for those joining us for the technical age. Well, my my childhood, stroke, my teenage experience. What are you saying I should relate it to music or generally?
You could just do generally, because right now you're doing music education and you're a musician, but I wonder, is that something you're doing when you're younger, or were you just kind of doing just anything when you were younger?
Okay. Well, I was born in a priesthood family, so that gave me that early exposure to music, especially within the church context. My first music lesson, I had my first music lesson in the church. I was trained by my choir master, who taught me rudiments of music. I started playing piano at about 7. I was exposed to no, at about 10, sorry, at about 10, I was exposed to small wood. Then that's one of the oldest piano tutor that I know of. And then started playing music in the church. To my secondary school days, I was actively involved in this school choir. I served as the college accompanist for over 3 years. So my teenage experience has been with music. That's what I can say for now.
Okay, and then one aspect in like the music education, I guess curriculum, did you more so start in college, or is music education something you were doing within like your secondary or primary school?
Yes, it started at secondary school, because then in primary school there was no music. Well, maybe we didn't have a music teacher, but I know in the secondary school we had up to just what we call if you look at the British nomenclature, you say year 7, year 8, year 9. That's our GSS1, GSS2, GSS3. At the senior level, we didn't have a music teacher, or we were not opportune to take music at senior level. So my music education formally terminated at junior secondary school level. But I went on, personal development, did MUSON exam, and other music education opportunities available.
Okay. And then I know from my experience when I was doing music education in school, I had to do several method instruments. I had to play brass, I had to play percussion, I had to play strings, and then when I graduated, I was licensed to teach K through 12. But to be honest, my primary strength is just strings. That's what I'm comfortable with. But in Nigeria, is it different in which someone would graduate and be licensed to teach band, orchestra, and choir, or would they just kind of focus on one specific instrumentation?
Well, if I get your question clearly, are you saying that is it possible for your post-secondary education to pay for music education? Is that what you're saying?
My question is, after college, would I'm just trying to compare between the U.S. and Nigeria. Would you still graduate, and would you be teaching? Would you be licensed to teach band, orchestra, and choir, or would it be you're just focusing on one area?
Oh, all right. Well, you know that you are talking of two different environments: the United States of America and then Nigeria. One understand that these are two economies. I mean, one is well established, the other one is growing, and it has implication on its education. But I know that after college, especially the National Certificate of Education program, that's NC program or polytechnic or university education, students are exposed generally to general musicianship, orchestra, choral music, applied music, where students have their major and minor instruments. So it is expected that a student, a graduate, a music teacher after school should be able to teach at least two instruments. That's why we offer major and minor instruments. But on a personal level, a student may develop capacity to play up to 4 instruments, which he or she can use, in a school. And then because of the experience that each student had gone through, especially with choral music, it's expected that a student, a teacher, should be able to establish a choir and also establish an orchestra or band. So again, there is the minimum knowledge that is expected of the student to acquire, and there is this knowledge again that students can also develop over time on their own to increase their capacity. So on the average, a student after school, after graduation, should be able to set up a band and a choir.
Okay. And then I know like specific things within Nigerian music, I'll definitely say is the rhythm. Like it's very Nigerian music is very rhythmic, but I guess in teaching a younger student who was developing, are there specific things a Nigerian educator would implement as opposed to someone in the US? I know from my experience, oftentimes, if a kid's learn violin, oftentimes "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star" is a song that's used. But I've wondered, like, different cultures, maybe there's a folk song in Nigeria that would better suit a Nigerian child in presenting them Suzuki or something that's very Western based.
Well, I know that there's this current conversation around decolonizing music education, which is something is nascent stage here in Nigeria, in Africa. Yes, I know that the awareness is becoming, more now that beyond using Western folk tunes or Western nursery rhymes for teaching beginners, we also have simple folk tunes to use. For instance, the Yoruba folk tune Mikiko, just about 3 or 4 notes, which is not it's about 4 tones. Do re mi, I mean, yes, do re mi, do mi mi, do mi re mi, do re do mi, do mi re, which is not different from mi re do re mi re re mi so so. That one even has another additional note. Mi re do re mi do re mi re do, or do ta 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 ta. So we have our simple folk tunes we can use. Again, it's about the understanding of these music educators in using our own local materials to teach these global concepts.
Okay, and then in you singing, do you use fixed or movable though?
Well, that's another issue. These are teaching methods, issues with teaching methods. When it's movable, we know that using the conventional major scale, depending on the instruments you're playing. Once the student is able to establish a do and can relate other notes around it, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, so I know that basically once a student establishes tonic center and he knows the relationship of all that, the student can navigate this way around the music.
Okay, yeah. Personally, I use fixed though, but I've seen benefits in both movable and fixed. But my other question, personally, I was taught fixed though, but I have friends who also use movable though. I think they both work well. I just think it's just having proficiency with one. But I guess another question I had was, for me personally, as an educator, I've always been trying to think, how can I implement more of a Nigerian perspective? I know you can probably implement things like works by Nigerian composers or folk songs, maybe from a rote-based level to more advanced written compositions. But, is there any advice you have for educators in the US who are trying to give a more, broader perspective, kind of like when we talk about like that decolonization, maybe teaching Nigerian more from like a Nigerian perspective? Do you have any advice on how to do that?
Yes, well, the world is a global village, like we all know. So the idea of global music is something that should come on board for 21st century music educators. You cannot just pick a music from your own immediate community to explain music from other communities. So begin to talk of music of other world culture as one of the musics of the world. For instance, you are in the US, you can take materials from Africa, from Nigeria, from Yoruba land to explain some concepts of music, in the US. All right. So, for instance, if you want to teach a concept like breathing, are there materials, exotic materials from outside the environment that can be used to explain this better? And this helps students to have this global knowledge. So the idea of globality in music education is very important. And I encourage music educators to look beyond their immediate environment, to use concepts of other music of other world culture to teach what this global idea. So again, you were talking about locality versus globality. How do we use these two framework to make a global music student or musician?
Okay, yeah, that's a great point. And I know for, we use a 7-note Western scale, but I know in some Indian music, it's not 7-note, it expands from that. But in Nigerian music, for the most part, is everything 7-note based off the Western scale? Or are there some forms of music that isn't based off that?
No, that is a common knowledge that African music, they are not fixed on the Western diatonic scale of do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. In fact, you know that one of the common scale you find in Africa, especially in Africa, is the pentatonic scale. Da, 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 da. If you move further, you find some scale bigger than pentatonic. In fact, sometimes you find 3-tone scale, you find 4-tone scale, you find 6-tone scale. You even find 7-tone scale, which is not built on the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do of the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti of the Western scale. So it is not correct. Totally, it's not correct to say that it's the music, even music outside the West, even in China, in other cultures, they have their own tone system. So, but it's just that the one we are first exposed to, we are first taught formally is the Western scale system, the major, minor, and other scale system.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's a good thought. That's a good thought. It's really interesting having this conversation with you because I feel like I'm learning more about just like music education from a Nigerian perspective. Because for the most part, most of my educators have just been white, and I sometimes keep thinking, there's a missing part to my culture within learning this kind of this area of music. But I wonder what it would just be like. I don't know, teaching within Nigeria. I feel like it would be maybe a more richer experience because I know for me sometimes um like for example when we do like exams, oftentimes when I look at the paperwork it's very like Beethoven or it's very Western composers, and I know there are other composers. I know there's Fela Shawande, Akin Uba, but sometimes I feel like when I look at just the overall material I'm seeing, it's just very European based, and I don't think sometimes it gives light to educators from or composers or musicians from a broader place in the world.
Oh, you want me to respond to that?
Yeah, if you'd like to.
Okay, well, again, it's about this issue of uh, what has dominated our 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 space of learning, not only in music, in other areas of learning, especially in Africa. It's been well, it's understandable, but we're seeing over the years, African composers have come of age. I mean, even beyond the show and days, the Ubers, of this world. I mean, especially when you talk of Nigerian composers, we have emerging composers who are doing great work in terms of organ music, uh, writing music for pianos. Just last week, Wednesday, we had Ayo Bankoli's 60th birthday. I'm sure you know the Ayo Bankoli, one of Nigeria's foremost composers. The
Yeah.
son, Ayo Bankoli Jr., turned 60. So there was a symposium in his honor, I mean, celebrating his 60th birthday. And we raised this issue of where with the African art music. There are composers, and we in that symposium we were able to realize that we have, even though the standard of these foremost composers, the Bankolis and the Ubers, may be very high, may be very, received all over the world. That is not to say that there are no younger composers who are not doing very excellent, and who are not doing excellent work. For instance, Ayo Lunoti, Showa J, Chris Oyenji, and the like. These are fantastic composers whose piano works have been even premiered in world stages. But again, one of the issues with the availability of this material. In fact, we even discovered that the writings of Yuba, the writings of Bankole Senior, they are not even available in Africa.
Yeah,
so that's another problem.
Yeah, I remember my senior year, I was trying to do a recital by Nigerian composers, and I still Akinuba had this opera called Shaka. I don't know where they're written. It's a great, I can find the audio somewhere on the internet, and one of the professors at my school sang in the opera back in like the early 2000s, but I can't find that music for the life of me.
Yeah, so that's one of the challenges we have. Works of early Nigerian composers, and I speak for Nigeria, they are almost, you can't find them here. You find them in libraries outside this country, and it's a big concern. For instance, Iban College himself told us that the music, the Egun variation, da 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 da, that the father wrote, he didn't get it. He said it was one of the junior colleagues of his father who told him that, look, they're about throwing away these recordings from Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation. Take the audio of some of your father's recording. It was from that recording that Ayoban College Jr. himself had his father's composition and was able to transcribe. I mean, it's an irony that even the son of a composer can't even find the music of his father. So that's the challenge sometimes Nigerian music educators face. materials are not readily available, but the narrative is changing with contemporary composers who are tech savvy, who are making this music available electronically after compositions. These compositions are shared. So we're beginning, but for older composers, it's a big issue finding materials of older composers to use for music education in Nigeria.
Okay. Yeah, that's been my experience too. I know oftentimes if I have to go buy music for my students, if I want to go online to buy music, typically the music for like maybe minorities, they just kind of group all together and they just call it maybe like eclectic or something, but it goes deeper than that. So
yeah.
And oftentimes if you look closely at the composer, maybe it'll be something by like music by Black composers, and the person who composed it is like white. It's a little conflicting, but yeah. My other question too is talking about like the music education technique aspect. Akojikbal this summer, we're actually doing a concert in Lagos, and we had this one incident where we had a certain piece and we needed musicians who could really read the music, but we had some Western instruments and some more indigenous, I would say, akuba and bembe. But I guess in those instruments, like talking drum, we were trying to, the musician we found initially, he was really good at playing, but it was hard for him to read the music. And for me, I wanted to be respectful of that. We need someone who can play, but also read the percussion part. But I know music is an oral experience. So I wasn't sure, if you're playing more indigenous instruments, should you have the expectation to also be able to read the notation, or just more so hear it? Oh, I think you're on mute, Dr. Ajose.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm on mute. Yeah. Well, you have raised a very germane issue, and it's not problematic in the sense that the musicians, your engagement with the musicians in Lagos, you are engaging musicians who are not schooled, and I use the word schooled, within the formal, music education, where you are taught lines and spaces, treble clef, G clef, and all that. No, these ones are musicians who learned playing of instrument by apprenticeship, whether playing by joining their father, brother, or kinsmen in playing music. So basically, their own form of music education is indigenous, and they have their own system of education too. Don't let us be confused to say this is until when you learn 5 lines and 4 pieces, you learn music education. That's indigenous ways African, make music education. So that person cannot read the Western music notation, but that person understands the technique of playing. So that brings us to the bigger question of how do we begin to conventionalize African, or our indigenous music making system? How do we write for talking drum, for instance? The Western model is not adequate, even for those of us who teach ethnomusicology, transcription, and analysis of African music. We just use it as the available tool to explain, these music nuances, but they are not sufficient enough. I give an example. You want to play, those what you call the glide notes. How do you explain them? So yes, even though they cannot read your 5 lines and 4 spaces, these musicians are excellent musicians. They are all right. But again, the issue of notation, which is something that I know that Association of Nigerian Musicologists have been making serious intervention to see how can it. And the problem again is we are the African community is so large. So one writing system may be very difficult to accommodate the musical nuances or dynamics of these multiple ethnic groups in Nigeria, for example. So do not be offended, and do not think that those musicians, they are literate musicians and they're all right.
Yeah.
But maybe because you're illiterate of their own kind of music, so you find that issue of their own knowledge system, your own knowledge system. How do we come to a point?
Yeah, and I know, yeah, they're good musicians. It's just like the notation part. But one thing I will say, when I was in like my music education classes, I would definitely say the Nigerian culture, the rote based or the musicianship is higher. I just think within the culture, music is, for example, is found in church. I remember, my parents would either be listening to, my dad grew up listening to Fela Kuti, but like I just think the culture is just more. There's just more musicianship. I know in some of my classes here, I just felt sometimes the musicianship, or I guess the aspect of using your ears to learn wasn't as good as a musician that I've met in Nigeria. Yeah, but really,
yes, again, like,
oh yeah, what were we saying?
Yes, like I said that, we said that, yes, music in Africa, the kind of the framework for music education in Africa, is by apprenticeship. You learn, you are taught to listen, to hear when a particular drum is not in tune. I was the drummer yesterday in church, and he was telling me his experience during the surgery that he couldn't, that there's a sound he wanted to hear. He said, for example, kokole. That expression goes beyond what you think. That musician knows when it's a particular depth on that drum is achieved. But for a Western colonized ear, you may not know if that drum has achieved that depth. So within indigenous context, music learning is like I've identified by rote. You watch by observation, you listen, you watch, you listen, you do, you watch, you listen, you do. So there's no writing system like we have in the Western music pedagogy.
Okay. But I guess, do you think the solution, because for me, I really try and be careful because even though I was born in Nigeria, I feel like I've just lived in the US for so long, and I don't want to have I don't want to come in with a bad, perception or think I know the solution or anything. But it seems like in my mind, initially I'm thinking the solution is to create some form of notation. But at the same time, I'm thinking maybe that isn't the solution. The solution is maybe taking more time to listen to figure out what the solution might be. Because I don't know. I feel like when I say, oh, we just need a form of notation that will work, I just feel there's a hint of that European, influence, if that makes sense.
Well, it's an ongoing conversation among African musicologists. The issue of notation, representation of our music, because our music over the years has been something adequately represented, like we have it. Like I said again, we're just making do of the Western idea, Western writing system that we have, because up to now we've not been able to come up with our own writing system like you have in China and other Asian communities where they have their own writing system. So again, it's an ongoing conversation. I know that musicologists, let me speak for the Nigerian experience, are working at coming to a point where we can have something that will, as it were, sufficient, maybe not 100%, but adequately capture our music so that we can represent our music the way they truly sound, the way they truly should be represented, using whichever medium. So for now, until then, we'll still rely on Western writing system to communicate our music to the global, because we can't wait. We can't wait until we have been able to develop a writing system before we start communicating with the global world. Somebody in China wants to play in Nigerian music. Somebody in Texas wants to play African work. So while we work on this system of notation, we continue to use music writing system from the West, to propagate our music until we have our own framework for writing.
Yeah, and I like how you phrase that, the representation, because that's something I think about. What does it truly look like to be represented accurately? Because right now it definitely feels, it's represented more so from a Western perspective at time with the notation. But if anyone has any questions too, please feel free to drop them. But I'm going to be doing some questions that people may have. Joseph was asking, we continuously engage with European musical works and syllabus, and there isn't much access to the indigenous compositions for our early musicians. And he's asking, what are possible factors behind that lack of access to indigenous works for younger musicians?
Well, I know that it is better compared to that of all the works of older composers. Contemporary young composers are now making their music available, that I know, even though the issue of again copyright and all that is also in place. But I know that younger composers are making their works available. Maybe they need to be in that space where you can have access to some, because I know quite a number of YG's work are available online. Olunoti, Onyeji, and I mean quite a number, even some of our composers, like younger ones, like Johnson Adenuga, one of our former students at the University of Ibadan. So I know that Tunji Dada too, another young, contemporary composer, and you can find our works available. The situation is much better now with younger composers, because they write this music and get it published right from their living room, and they get it published online. Yeah. Unlike before. And one of the challenges with older composers is that the publishing firms have gone into extinction. For instance, I know that Ife University Press was actively involved in publishing the works of some Nigerian leading composers like Ayoba Nkoli, the works of Yuba. But Ife University Press, I'm not sure, is still operating. So again, the Nigerian social issue has also, has also truncated these other areas of development. So perhaps some of the works you find, I'm talking of older composers, there are works that have found their way to the US, to Europe, and then maybe, of course, because of continuity and sustainability over there, some of these publishing firms are still in operation, which means that these works will still, be published. So again, to the global community, there's much you can also get from our emerging composers here in Africa, in Nigeria precisely. Younger composers are coming up. A guy just 2 days ago, I saw, is it David Ibimi? Not David Ibimi, that's one day, I can't remember his last name now. He did an arrangement of Carry Me They Go, this popular Christian song, Carry Me They Go, Jehovah Carry Me They Go, they go, they go. Very nice arrangement. And that music has been in the social media for quite a while now. People mimicking it, you find the satire version of Carry Me They Go, Jehovah Carry Me They Go, my husband now. So I'm sure that must have inspired that composer to bring that music. I even saw a choir arrangement performed by a choir, although I didn't see the name, on Facebook. So, and this guy published the music on Facebook. And I'm just saying that younger composers are very good, and that the global community, publishing firms, even local publishers should begin to tap into this resurgence of young creatives, in doing Nigerian compositions, piano, trumpet, and for various instruments. So the market is becoming big for publishers who may want to tap into this opportunity.
Okay, that's great. I guess in going to those instruments, I spoke with Mr. Owaje, and he mentioned, this was like maybe 6 months ago, but I know he was saying how with certain compositions you may not see them as much because it's hard to find. For example, maybe like bassoon works; those may be more difficult to find in terms of musicians or the instrument itself. But would you say, I guess certain instruments that I typically do see more often is like trumpet, violin, cello, double bass, I don't see as much, tuba, I don't see as much, percussion instruments, like maybe xylophone, but I don't see like, timpani. But then again, I keep thinking, again, these are Western instruments, if you look more closely, you'll see plenty, I feel like, of a kuba or talking drum or bembe. So I think it's going back to that question of, the representation and, and within the environment of Nigeria, like maybe it's fine that, there aren't, bassoons that could be easily accessible because of the environment.
Well, I think one of the limitations could be that the composers themselves are looking at the medium to express their music. So for instance, if I do not have bassoon, I cannot play bassoon. I mean, find it difficult to write for bassoon. And then I also want to write something that has utility value. I don't just write something and dump on the shelf. I want to write something that my saxophonist can play on Sunday in church, that a student who is doing recital at MUSON can play for his son. So again, availability of instruments that are readily available could be a major source of concern source of interest for composers. But I also know that composers are also writing. In fact, I know of a very good friend of mine, Michael Bakari. I don't know, I'm sure you should be joining this too. He's written for trombone, and I know that, he's written for trombone, I think he's written for cello, and I know that some of his compositions have been played by musicians outside this country. So maybe not in a massive proportion like works for piano, organ, saxophone. I know quite a number of saxophone works. Stephen Olusoji wrote Wasobia for saxophone, beautiful saxophone composition, touching on themes around Yoruba, Igbo, and Hausa. So there's quite a number of compositions. But again, we talk about this issue of circulation. Some of these compositions are just written for immediate composers around, performance around the composer. So they are not being circulated globally. So I know from my own interaction with younger composers, I know that composers, maybe instrument like bassoon, because I can count orchestras in Nigeria where you have bassoon. Same with timpani. So people want to write something that, like I said initially, we want to write something that has utility value that everyday, music making can quickly make use of.
Yeah, that's very true. I actually, Michael, I think he's here. Yeah, Bakari. He's actually one of our featured composers for our concert this summer. Yeah, I've been sending those emails to everyone. That's funny. So really quickly, I have one more question, but I just want to open up the space. If anyone has any questions right now for Dr. Ajose, you can either unmute or type into the chat. All right. So my last question, and this is, as an educator myself, and you being an educator, but having years more experience, what's your advice to someone who's aspiring to become a music educator? If you could meet anyone doesn't matter where they're from, they want to become a music educator, like what's the biggest advice you could impart to them on, how to go about becoming an educator?
Well, the field of music education is quite interesting because it cuts across human endeavor. From cradle, you start engaging with music education. Yeah, they are teaching you mathematical concepts, language concepts. It's done musically. So it's something that, and even up to death, when you do music therapy, do music therapy for people who have terminal diseases. It's about education. You find community music teaching, even for those with mental health. So it's a big spectrum of activity for those involved in music education. So my advice would be that one, be determined. Don't see it as an aftermath. Oh, because I can't play the organ, or because I can't conduct a choir. Oh, then let me search for music education. No, it is something you are determined to make full use of, and especially for a Nigerian music educator, we need to begin to see how we can push our own indigenous concept of music education into the classroom. Like I said earlier, we can use our local knowledge to explain global concepts. And this is very important if we're talking of globality in music education.
Great. Yeah, for me personally, I definitely want to spend more time learning about how to implement it more within the classroom, because I feel like someone being Nigerian, I have a responsibility to, engage my students with, beyond the Western culture that I've seen.
Yeah. And again, if you involve local materials, when I say indigenous materials of class, you'll be speaking to this global idea of inclusivity. You include, because especially in global community, our students are from different parts of the world. I'm sure in your classroom in the US, you find Nigerian students in your class, children from Nigerian context. So they feel excluded. They feel, and then you talk about the issue of diversity. Today's knowledge must be inclusive, must be diversified, so that people can understand this concept from an holistic point of view. So for us to just sit within the Western epistemology in music education, we may be disenfranchising our students from global community.
Yeah. I know for me personally, like when I was doing music education, my middle school was predominantly white. I was the only Black person. My high school was predominantly white. And then in my college, in my music education class, there was only 2 Black people in our group. I've only met one other Nigerian educator in the US that I know, but then I realized, if you go to Nigeria, there's plenty of educators because everyone's Nigerian. But I think in the US, I don't meet a lot of Nigerian educators. I meet maybe African American, but like Black males in the US of educators, we're like 1%. Most Black people that are teaching are mostly African American women. But when you talk about that 1% of Black males and then trying to find the Nigerian, it's I'm like a very small percentage of educators in the US. Yeah. All right. I think if no one has any other questions, I want to apologize for the confusion with the technology this morning. I am not good at technology, but I'm glad it's able to work out. I want to thank Dr. Ajose for sharing his time today. Again, I'm sorry about the technical difficulties, but I'm glad we're able to make this work. I'll share the recording with you probably within the coming days. I was going to upload it to YouTube and then put it on our social media, but I can put in the chat really quickly our org's information. We're actually doing a concert in Nigeria this summer. Fun fact about me, I was born in Nigeria, but I recently went back to Ikiti for my sister's wedding. So I was born there. I left when I was 5, and I came back this past Christmas. So I came back for the first time in 15 years, but I'm going to come back again this summer. It was definitely an interesting experience. Yeah. Anytime I tried to speak Yoruba, my family would be like, "Oh, beyond you."
Yeah. Oh, gbìyànjú. Gbìyànjú.
Yeah. So
You've been colonized linguistically.
yeah, I
The
think
language where even you struggle to pronounce akojopo.
yeah,
Akojopo.
yeah. I should have just called us, I don't know, something American, but when I was talking to my Yoruba teacher, I was like, I want something that really feels Yoruba, and I think I chose a name that even I can't pronounce well, but maybe someone else will pronounce it one day. Yeah. All right. Again, thank you all so much. I know for me, it's what time is it for y'all? Noon? It's noon. Yeah. It's 6 a.m. for me, so I may go
Wow.
back. I may go back to bed.
Bed.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you again so much, everyone, for joining us for this session.
Thank you.
Dr. Ajose.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, yes.